Okay, welcome everyone. This is certainly a very exciting event that we have for you because this is the focus of what has instantly become overnight the hottest story in U.S. politics. If you haven't read the Daily Wire report, you really should do it right after the presentation. This presentation is done as part of our program on un-American activities, which was kind of named tongue-in-cheek, but it proved its name immediately when this very un-American group of critical race theory terrorists, there's really no other word to use for them, came after us, but we didn't back down. We went right back at them. And now we have the entire political system lining up to put a stop to these people. And we're going to sue everything and anyone connected to it. So very good times are ahead. And what you're about to see is the presentation that started it all. So I now pass the microphone to our program manager.
All right, thanks, sir. So I'm the program manager for the Un-American Activities group that we have here, and I'll be leading you through the first little bit of our presentation. Then I'm going to turn it over to Parents Against Critical Theory for their brief. Just a quick background on me. I started looking into these matters over 5 years ago when I saw what was happening on college campuses. Immediately recognized that what was happening there was not going to stay on college campuses, and it has not. And it's now actually running our government. As you'll see here, we hit on some of these buzzwords. You'll see the Biden administration is completely taken over by equity advocates and critical race theory, or critical theory more in general, because critical theory comes in a variety of different packages, and we'll discuss those here. Let's start quickly with a definition of critical race theory, and what I want to point out here is the two academics that are listed are law professors at the University of Alabama. One teaches a class on critical race theory, another teaches a class on critical white studies. So this is the definition of critical race theory according to law professors. So let that sink in that it's in the legal field. So bear with me, I don't like reading from slides, but this one's important. Unlike traditional civil rights, which embraces incrementalism and step-by-step progress, critical race theory questions the very foundations of the legal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationale, and principles of constitutional law. So right from jump, they're telling us that the purpose of critical race theory is to question, and if you're questioning something, you're trying to change something, to change the very principle of our constitutional law, okay? And along with Enlightenment rationalism, or what they would term Western civilization, right? So really quickly to understand that critical theory, it's not diversity and inclusion training. You know, when you see these things rolled out that way, diversity, equity, inclusion do not mean what you think that they mean. To them, they mean something completely opposite. Equity is not equality, right? Equity is shifting the levers of power in order to attain an equal outcome, right? Diversity is not about diversity of thought, and inclusion sure isn't about acceptance. Certain, as we've just found out with how people are trying to attack us, they're not about equality. It's not about inclusion. Quickly, some buzzwords here. One thing that you'll notice with critical theory is that they redefine language, right? So language that you have come to know over the course of your life, they will redefine that. We actually saw them redefine something during the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, where Webster's literally redefined sexual preference in the dictionary that day when she was being questioned by a senator from Hawaii. But some specific words here to look at, like I said, equity. We're seeing a lot of white privilege, white supremacy, Latinx. I've actually now seen Filipino X. So if there's anybody with the Filipino descent, know that they're coming after your the Filipino name as well. Systematic racism, patriarchy, hate speech, white adjacent, Asian Americans, or really anyone that believes in the way that America was founded. It believes in our Constitution. Is if you are successful through merit and hard work, whether you're white, black, Asian, and you reject what critical race theorists posit, they will label you as white adjacent now. So understand that. Restorative justice, talk about that in a minute, economic justice. So why is this happening, right? So, you know, it part of it comes from a good place, right? We all do want to make sure that everyone is treated equally based upon who they are. We should not, we reject racism totally, 100%. We do not accept any racism here. So nobody should ever be judged by an immutable characteristic such as the color of one's skin, that you were born into. But what they see is that everything is that there's a system of oppression that they want to dismantle in order to do away with what they see as historical inequities, right? So it goes back to the 1619 Project and what was actually the founding of this country. You can see that there, right? So they see systems of oppression everywhere. What does this mean? To them, where you see the principles of enlightenment in the definition, they believe that Western civilization, which was created by, in their theory, straight white men, is designed to oppress people in order to keep straight white men in power. That is what they believe. So they believe that in order to overcome this, they need to they use critical theory to dismantle those systems of oppression. Okay, and not realizing, or they actually realizing that we have a system of government in place, especially here in America, that was very well thought out to try to provide as much equality as we can. Yes, we can always do better, but we've done damn well, and it's their desire is to basically strip down what has been a great and fantastic country. How they're doing it and why they're doing it, they want to take over our institutions, and you can see that they have big tech, they have the U.S. government now. You can see what's going on with the military. They have the military. They have the mainstream media, right? They have many of your workplaces now in your HR departments. They have woke capital. So they've done a long march through the institutions, and they want to control your ability to speak and say things. If they don't agree with you, they're going to try to shut you up, just like we found out here over the last couple of days. So it's a threat because it's trying to undermine the Constitution. They want to create a new society. Okay, it's really a threat because it no longer judges anyone by their individual character, right, or their individual merits. It reduces everyone to a group, whether that group is your race, your gender, or your sexual orientation, or even your politics, right? It's reduction to a group versus treating everyone like an equal, and an individual. And you can see it's erasing our history. It's taking down our culture. It's attacking the foundation of this country, right? Because they want to create a new and more equitable future, right? Kind of starting at year zero. So call it what you will, whether you want to call it wokeism or neo-Marxism. I like John McWhorter's neo-racism. It's identity politics. It is utterly lacking in humility. It offers no path to forgiveness, as we just saw with what happened to Chris Harrison in The Bachelor. You saw it happen to Sharon Osbourne. Absolutely no forgiveness, right? They're immediately taken care of, and it operates as a fundamentalist religion, and they're really preaching it with the religious zealotry. Okay. So how does it manifest? Here are just some screen grabs that I've taken from things recently. You can see this, the BBC from a couple of weeks ago. Should they count Jews as ethnic minorities? They think that math is racist, so they want to dismantle racism in math. They think that 2 + 2 literally equals 5, and they are hardcore zealots about that. You can see in Arizona, so this is in the state of Arizona. They're teaching that babies as young as 3 months already display signs of racism, right? And that they remain strongly biased in favor of whiteness by the age of 5. That's what they're teaching in the Arizona school system. You can see Demi Lovato up here. I put that up here, and these materials will be made available afterwards. They'll be on the website, so you can link to them. But the point that I'm making with Demi Lovato and her stance with the trans issue is that she has almost 100 million followers that she's broadcasting this to. You can see a genderbread person. You can see a former director of the CIA saying that he's embarrassed to be a white male. He's speaking in these terms, right? And then the bottom left is actually a quote from Robin DiAngelo, one of the chief priestesses, where she's says that white people who treat all races equally are dangerous, right? They believe that treating people equally is dangerous. So what is it? Like I've already kind of touched on, it's an ideological, it's a political framework, and it posits that there's an oppressor and oppressed viewpoint. They've taken elements of critical theory and of Marxism, and they've kind of blended it together, right? And so it repurposes the Marxist paradigm, the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, or proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. And it now posits that there's an oppressor and oppressed, right? So anything that was developed under Western civilization is a structure of white supremacy, right? That is designed to oppress people of color, other people that they feel that are marginalized, right? So they've created a new formula there where they replace the economic theory with an oppressor and oppressed binary, right? And everything is then used through an intersectional lens, meaning that they rack and stack who has the most amount of power at a given time, right? So right now, I would say, trans Black woman is kind of sitting up at the top of the intersectional hierarchy there, right? So I've covered group identity versus individual agency, and I've covered the point on Western civilization. So again, how does it manifest itself, right? So you can see here, this is from last week, Grace Church School up. I think it's about $40,000 a year to send your kids to this private school in New York, where they want to replace the terms mom and dad with grown-ups, folks, family, to be more inclusive. Where they want to change boys and girls, guys, ladies and gentlemen, people, folks, friends, readers, mathematicians. You see, they're redefining language on us as we live and speak. If you're familiar with Loudoun County, you know what Pack broke about canceling Dr. Seuss. It's a healthcare threat, right? So that's an actual Facebook group, woke doctors, and we'll get down to that in a little bit. But that should frighten people. Here's a trans activist, right? And I just want to read this, make sure people understand, right? What they're saying. These days, the narrative is that transgender people will come into bathrooms and abuse little girls. The supposed purity of the victims has remained stagnant. Now he's saying there are no princesses. Little girls are also kinky, meaning they want these people to come into the bathrooms. Your girls aren't as straight and narrow as you think, right? And this is someone that's being invited to college campuses across the country to speak, okay? So who's doing it? The progressive left is doing it. It's funded by billionaires. It's funded by people like Bill Gates. He's the one that he's pumped $10 million into the math is racist studies. There are large billionaires out there that are pumping this in into NGOs and other nonprofits. It's totally overtaken the universities and institutions. I'll talk on that in a minute. As mentioned, big tech, Hollywood's all for it. The media, you can go and you can look at what classes to take in a journalism school, and they actually are teaching social justice. So they want you to examine news stories through a lens of social justice versus objective facts, truth, reality. All right, so there's an agenda there. Okay. Want to read really quickly. So who's doing it, right? So here's Ibrahim Kendi. He's received $10 million from the founder of Twitter for his foundation, I think at Boston University, right? And basically what he's saying in this statement is that you're either, he's talking about anti-racism. That's a term that we're seeing now. It's a term we're seeing here in Loudoun County that we're just out. So anti-racism posits that you're either an anti-racist or you're a racist, meaning you're either working to reestablish power for marginalized people or you're a racist. If you say that you live a colorblind life, you're a racist. If you say that you want to treat people equally, you are a racist. You need to be either actively working with people like Kendi to redistribute power in his favor, or you're a racist, right? The claim of not racist neutrality is a mask for racism. This is what he's saying, not me, right? So, I've covered anything that's been designed by Western civilization is designed to oppress and or is racist. So we're defined by a race, gender, and sex. Again, more manifestation of how this looks. Okay. The item on the left here for aspects, assumptions of white culture, that was pushed out by the Smithsonian this past summer when the riotings first started happening. This is white culture according to critical theory, rugged individualism, family structure, the scientific method, a worth ethic, following time, showing up on time, justice, based upon law, common law, religion to them is white culture. It's part of white supremacy culture. Okay, and this was again pushed out by the Smithsonian. All right. You can see the image at the top. That's an actual equity trainer. I wish I was trolling people, but I'm not. All white people are racist. PayPal me. And we'll talk about how it's a big billion-dollar business here in a minute. Again, this is a equity training for teachers on how to deconstruct whiteness in their curriculum, right? And this is some of the stuff. Whiteness is the construction of global systems and structures that reinforce the inherent values, norms, and advantages of white supremacy, superiority, and normalization. The top right is Kendi's response to why Amy Coney Barrett adopted Black children. Because she wants to civilize the savage children in the superior ways of white people. That's what Amy Coney Barrett was trying to do. The whole trans, and I'll touch on this in a minute. With the whole Save Girls sports movement. You can see here in Connecticut, just two biological males who've been competing as women now hold 15 state championship titles, meaning those probably 4th, 5th, 6th place girls finishers are not getting scholarships to college because they were beaten by biological males. So how is it being done, right? So it was done, and there's a really good article that I linked down to the bottom here in a resource section, or a really good YouTube clip called Grievance Studies, where a bunch of left-wing academics undertook a mission to try to expose how political corruption has set in within the academy, within our colleges and universities. So what was done is they basically spent the last 50 years laundering terrible ideas through the academy, right? They operate in a groupthink bubble, right, where their theories are never challenged outside their own specific bubble, right? So they're allowed to percolate because the hard scientists didn't think that they would ever actually move over. So they kind of winked and accepted gender studies programs, fat studies programs, gender studies programs, programs that, some of the stuff definitely does deserve to be explored, right? But the outputs that these things have, when you look at how some of the research was done, that literally they're writing essentially what are called autoethnographies, which are diary entries for all intents and purposes, right? Where they're writing what they feel, their lived experience, right? And maybe they'll ask a couple of friends, so they might have a sample size of like 1 or 2 people. But those papers are then published and treated as true academic research, right? That research is then taken by the media, taken by politicians, and they can say research shows, and they can point back to a college paper. Well, the college paper is a diary entry for everything. I think one of the most obscene things that this group of academics did with the grievance studies approach was they literally took Mein Kampf, they took Hitler, and they replaced Jew with white male, and the paper was accepted, because it was written from a particular political framework that said that as long as you're treating white males this way, because white males are part of the patriarchy, it was okay to treat them this way. They took Mein Kampf. Think about that. And that was treated as research. And that research then is further used to push this narrative along. Okay. It's now entered into classrooms as early as preschool, right? And it goes all the way from kindergarten all the way up to through college and into our HR systems. I have a friend who's telling me that his 5-year-old's coming, from virtual school here in Fairfax County, and all he sees is race now, because that's what he's being taught in kindergarten. Something that's really important to point out. So this is on the left-hand side. This is the Association of American Medical Colleges, right? This is a group that board certifies doctors, right? And there's a whole section now to one of their latest updates here in 2021 that they're going to be combating white privilege and systematic racism. They're spouting Ibrahim Kendi chapter and verse, right? These are our doctors that are going to have to spout critical race theory if they want to become certified, right? Think about that. It's frightening, because this is an ideology, whereas science should be dictating what determines whether or not you become an actual doctor, an MD. Okay. So again, they've laundered it through the academy. It was legitimized there. It then appears, and it can be used by politicians and businesses and whatnot. And they can say, look, studies show, research shows. So again, how is this manifesting itself? On the right-hand side, there's a picture of Bill Gates, again, $10 million into pointing out that math is racist. In Boston, they suspended the advanced program because they were disturbed by the number of Asian and white students that were in those classrooms. The nurses in the UK are being told to swap words such as breast milk for more inclusive human milk. Again, there's a gender component to this, where the trans push is literally stripping away women's rights. It's stripping away womanhood and femininity in order to appease the whole trans movement. Okay. One of Joe Biden's first executive orders that he signed when he came into office was basically saying that biological boys now have to compete in girls' sports, right? And the ramifications are huge. I mean, just if you think about it, I think it was the boys national club, 15 and younger, defeated the entire women's national team, U.S. women's national team in a soccer game. Right? I think it was if you took the track and field results for racing, for sprinting and whatnot from the state of Illinois, from the high school state of Illinois, and beat all of the female women Olympic athletes. So just think about what that means. And there's been a huge increase in the number of children who are identifying themselves as trans. And the damage that it does is if they choose to actually go through with taking puberty blockers and having gender reassignment surgery, and instead of what most studies are showing is that there's a rapid onset gender dysphoria that occurs. That more than likely these kids are suffering from depression and some other type of mental illness, and that the last number that I saw late last week was that close to 400% of people that have been transing lately have been detransing as they realize that they're not actually in the wrong body. So we shouldn't be trying to push kids into the wrong body, especially starting in kindergarten. There's a lot going on with the Pentagon pushing diversity and inclusion, and you can see there was a concerted attack on Tucker for trying to point out that we want a military that defends this country, and let's focus on that. It's not to focus on, insulting women. I don't think that was the point there. There's a whole new grading system that was put into place in the San Diego. That woman's actually been put up to be, I think, the Deputy Secretary of Education, that superintendent, where she changed the whole system so that kids can turn their grades in, or their papers in, and their homework in whenever they want, and they suffer no penalty. They can show up to class whenever they want, and there's going to be no attendance penalty for them, because grades are racist, attendance, punctuality, time is racist. And again, the sexual path here, you can see, you can use those different types of produce in case you don't have a dildo at home. Okay, this is what they're teaching in our family life education. I believe that's in California from about 2 years ago. So, what's going on? A lot of people, thankfully, are starting to recognize that there's so much akin to what happened during the Cultural Revolution in China to what's going on in America today. If you don't abide by what they say and obey their speech laws and codes that they're forcing on us, they're going to try to cancel you, right? So they may not be marching people through the streets just yet, but they can march you through the literal streets through social media and things like that. This is a direct challenge to our legal system. It undermines civil rights. It underlines the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's a direct threat to the First, Fifth, and 14th Amendments, Title IX when it comes to women's sports. And now Biden just signed an executive order basically allowing kangaroo courts back on college campuses. They really, it's designed to attack the family. One of the big proponents of this is Black Lives Matter, right? And they explicitly state that they're designed to destroy the nuclear family, right? There's a loss of objective reality, of precision, meaning of words. This is a national security threat. Do you think that our adversaries are focusing in on all these things that divide and defeat us internally? I mean, hell, if I was an outside adversary, I'd be pumping millions into whatever nonprofit or what that I could in order to keep fomenting this. Again, I said anti-racism is a racist belief system, right? John McWhorter, look him up. He defines it as neo-racism. Talked about how this is a threat to womanhood and to femininity. It denies biological science. This is a safety threat, for if they want equity within hiring practices, and they've actually said this. The woman that Biden has nominated to be his DOJ chair for the Office of Civil Rights has said that she would favor some type of equity push when hiring things such as air traffic controllers, right, or for pilot entry programs. There's already a push within the medical field to reduce the barrier to entry, the test scores and whatnot for medical schools. So there's the health threat, and not to mention the trans push with, Joe Biden saying kids as young as 6 should be able to trans, right? And in many states, they're moving with you must affirm immediately, meaning if your kid says that he thinks he is now Billy when she was born Jane, right? These doctors are told that they must immediately affirm that, and maybe and help her on a path to taking puberty blockers and altering her body. It's terrible. It's an end of meritocracy. You can see what's going on at Thomas Jefferson High School here in Northern Virginia. You can see it's happened in the academies of Loudoun, in Loudoun County schools. It's happening in New York City. It's happening in Boston. It's happening in San Francisco, where they're removing merit-based tests, which are the most blind testing that you can do in order to admit what they want to do is increase the admittance of blacks and other people of color into these programs, right? So it's really an attack on Asians because Asians dominate a lot of those types of programs, and Asians are now fighting back. And what you also see is it's a threat to Asians in that, in a legal standpoint, district attorneys for restorative justice practices do not want to hold certain people accountable based upon the color of their skin for crimes that they commit, right? They feel like there are too many black people that are in jail or too many people of color that are in jail. So they're turning these people free. So we've seen a huge increase in the number of attacks of on Asians throughout our really deep blue cities lately. And it's because district attorneys and the prosecutors there are not prosecuting crime. So people are getting away with it. And it's terrible to watch all these attacks occur. So I'm kind of up against the block. Stop here. So these are things that I've taken from recent posts. You can see there's something on the anti-Asian violence. Biden wants white and Asian Americans at the back of the lines because that's equity for COVID vaccines. You can see banning company, woman is now spelled with an X. This is a House candidate. Standardized testing is a pillar of systematic racism. Math teachers use TikTok instead of asking students to show their work to fight racism. The thing that the whiteboard there in the center is something that was actually conducted. That was a diversity training conducted at Sandia National Labs. That's where our nuclear scientists work to, control our nuclear weapons. And they were basically put through struggle sessions there. And again, in the UK, where they don't have free speech laws, that's the police driving around in a van saying that being offensive is an offense. And they've arrested thousands of people in the UK in the last 3 years for what they term hate speech. So what can we do? Fight back. Don't dismiss it. Don't think that it's a joke. Get engaged. Call your reps. Educate yourself and make sure you're educating others. Share information like we have put together here. I found that visuals do the best. If you have standing, take action. Sue the hell out of these people, right? These are civil rights abuses. This is your kids that they're attacking, or these are your civil rights and your jobs. If you can seek alternative education options, I would recommend to do so. If you're so inclined, run for office and make sure you're voting for people that aren't going to put up with this. But this is it's a cultural revolution that's going on, and the desire is to fundamentally change the country. So help us fight back. Here are some resources that you can look at. There's some short videos up top, 5 minutes and less. I highly recommend that you look at those. Definitely check out the Evergreen series and the Grievance Studies series by Mike Nana. It's a little bit longer. The Grievance Studies one is 6 minutes. The others are about 20, 25 minutes a piece. But you'll see what happened, and you can see how it's happening in society here. That happened to Evergreen, happened at a college out in the Pacific Northwest. Here's some people to follow, some books to read. You can see, if you read Days of Rage, you can see where this traces back to radicals of the 60s and the 70s. Some podcasts that you can listen to. Tucker did a whole thing on this a few weeks back. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Pat. Let me stop sharing my screen. On over to you, sir.
I need to be able to share.
All right, hang tight. She's taking care of that.
All right, not a problem. All right, now it's up to me not to mess it up. Here we go. Able to see my screen?
I can.
Okay, we will go ahead. My name is Scott. I'm the founder of PAC Parents Against Critical Theory. I did this back in September when I finally had reached my limit with the CRT equity type material that I kept seeing coming in, arriving via email from the school district. I knew something was brewing probably about a year and a half ago or so because they had their equity assessment done, and it didn't smell right. Just a quick title page. So critical CRT awareness. So my whole point with trying to get my organization going is to create awareness that are centered around facts and examples for parents, students, and the Loudoun County community as a whole. But it's also applicable to others around the country, because just because we live in Loudoun doesn't mean it's not applicable in Ohio or Kansas. It's the same thing. So PAC takes a slightly different example. Chris has done a phenomenal job talking about critical race theory. And what I've been focusing on more has been trying to go into a more micro level, if you will, like more within Loudoun County. And my objectives have been to expose any and all people that are contributing to critical race theory in Loudoun County into the students, from, it could be from lawmakers to school board members to teachers to the NAACP, and the list goes on and on. But also provide supporting documentation on why I am exposing them. I can't just come out and say because I disagree with them. These are just a couple recent examples on the bottom here of just a couple stories. So there was something that caught some attention probably about a month ago, and that was Loudoun County Public Schools, doing away with Dr. Seuss. I mean, which caught national attention. We broke that story at the end of February, and everybody scratches their head like, this just doesn't make any sense. Another story that I think is a pretty big one, I put this out in November. This is regarding the the Student Equity Ambassador Club. So the Student Equity Ambassador Club is a club that is for people of color only. I have a couple posts with the documentation from the county, and I took it a step further and contacted my kids' high school and said my kids want to join. And I have the email exchange with the principal and the equity advisor that said, well, they're welcome to join, but basically they have to sit on the outskirts because the voices are reserved for people of color. Okay. This woman here is Beth Bartz. I think you're going to be hearing an awful lot about her in the coming days if you haven't started hearing some things today, whether it's from the Daily Wire, the Town Hall. This is a story that broke just late this afternoon that is a very in-depth story, and it contains a lot of characters and people within this county, whether it's the school, the county government, the NAACP, the list really goes on. School board members, teachers are very, very actively involved in trying to shut me down and shut the Virginia Project down. And then another story, another post over here, just to give you, I go in different places where I find evidence and information that's worthwhile. And this is a story about the NAACP. There's actually video evidence of this on my site where they're meeting with a couple school board teachers, a couple teachers about trying to undermine the school board, different school board members, all in the name of trying to push the NAACP narrative further into our classrooms. Now, this also involves a school board member that has a soft spot for special ed kids. And there is a teacher that openly says in this video, I know just how to deal with people like this and present racial topics in a disability sort of way or framework, which I think is really disgusting. But we got it on video, and I just want to make sure people see what's going on. This slide here, just to give you an idea, Loudoun County has been turned upside down, inside out, and everybody is a racist and a white supremacist based on 7% of the student population. Now, I'm not suggesting these 7% are bad kids, not by any stretch, but the NAACP, the Loudoun School Board, the Loudoun County Public Schools would have you believe otherwise. They would have you believe that the other 93% are affiliated with white supremacists, are racist, were born that way. And that's not even going into about the 10,000 plus teachers and staff that are, largely white, that are also a major part of this problem because they don't know how to teach and appeal to people of color. Almost 2 years ago exactly, Loudoun County entered into an agreement with an organization called the Equity Collaborative to conduct an equity assessment. This isn't new news. I mean, they paid $450,000 for it. essentially for this organization to come back and say, well, this is why you're racist. This is why you need to do all these different things. Some of the reasons for the county going in this direction was a heavy push from the NAACP because of their insistence, discrimination, racism, and white supremacy is at the cornerstone of Loudoun County Public Schools and within Loudoun County. There are some other elements as well that they believe that educators sidestep the issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity because they find it to be uncomfortable. So they don't know how to engage their non-white students, not necessarily in conversations about race, but they don't know how to engage them because of their cultural differences. So this is a new phenomenon I don't think anybody's ever been aware of. I know quite a few successful teachers that don't really care, and they are able to connect with their students. To give you some, just a little bit more understanding, the equity assessment. So there was 24 schools that were assessed. So 24 schools of 94 schools, and a select number of teachers and a very, small select number of students were part of this discussion with this equity consultant group. And ironically, the primary stakeholders are Black Student Advisory Committee. In Loudoun County, it's known as MSAC, Minority Student Advisory Academic Committee. In other counties and states and locations around the country, it may be called something different. It amounts to an adjunct school board, is really what it amounts to. Black Teacher Focus Group, Hispanic Teacher Focus Group, and the NAACP and Loudoun Freedom Center, which is both of them are run by Michelle Thomas in Loudoun County. Going on to the next slide. So what we got, as a result of this assessment, right, or this assessment, there were 5 emergent themes. There was low levels of racial consciousness with school staff, students, and parents. The county needs to hire more diverse staff to reflect student racial populations. Economic diversity complicates racial discussions, and it's always focused on poverty. Disproportionate discipline policies impact Black students. Many non-white students have experienced the sting of racial insults and slurs or racially motivated violent actions. So what's interesting about this, and I mean, it's a widespread statement, which is what these type of people are good at, is they're very good at creating generalities. So for example, when we look at hire more diverse staff to reflect student racial populations, okay, fine, I'm okay with that, right? But it's ambiguous. It's ambiguous. Like if you go back to last year when the whole George Floyd thing broke out, you kept hearing, the narrative that police were hunting Black people for sport. Now, that was far from the case. 2019, there was 254 documented cases of Black people dying or being killed by police. There was only roughly 13, that were unarmed. Each and every one of those incidents has a story to be told underneath. There's details underneath it that they don't want to disclose. So in the case of this hire more diverse, they won't give you a number. We know there's 7% Black students in Loudoun County Public Schools. Do you want 7% of the teacher population to be Black or Hispanic or whatever the case is? But they don't say that. They leave it open-ended, which to me is problematic because you're not really suggesting a solution to the problem. You're just saying, here's part of the solution, and we'll tell you when the solution has been reached. And I think that's deceptive. 4 primary recommendations are create superintendent message condemning white supremacy, which they did, accountability for addressing racially motivated acts, create learning for educators around color consciousness and implicit bias. So implicit bias, in other words, there's a lot of these terms and these buzzwords and phrases are overlapping, right? So it's to suggest that you are unconsciously racist or implicitly biased means you have some racial tendencies or racist tendencies that you are just not aware of based upon your actions, based upon the way you say things, do things, present things, the clothing that you wear. It's really just bizarre. And then in the end, create an action plan for a diverse, equitable, and inclusive hiring practices. So they use a lot of words like equitable, diverse, inclusive, and they all sound like innocent sounding words. If you come across these words anywhere, keep reading, because they're not going to dive into what they're selling. They're snake oil salesmen. They're going to paint it with a glossy image, or glossy or non challenging words like inclusive and equity. To give you a result, in the last 12 months, think about that. We have 349 what I refer to as equity soldiers in Loudoun County Public Schools. 349. Not all of them are paid, right? The ones that are paid, that annual expenditure is $2.3 million. Now, these equity armies or these equity soldiers come in different flavors. So, for example, Loudoun County, these people are paid equity advisors. So there's 94 schools, and ideally there's one equity advisor in each and every school. However, you'll see that I have 113 listed here. That's because there's 2 equity advisors in 19 schools. Now, I looked at the demographics to see if there was some nuance, whether there was, more black students or less white students or more white students. There wasn't anything that really suggested why there should be additional equity resources, okay? But this is just not a good thing. And annually, you're looking at about $500,000 in an annual expense just for these people. I'm going to jump down here to where it says MSAC delegate. So an MSAC delegate is a volunteer position, whether it's a parent, a teacher, or whatever, somebody from the community that will be a delegate for each and every school. So now you got 94 MSAC delegates. But what they're going to do, I have no idea. I've never seen such a layer. I challenge you to find 349 math soldiers to help better our students with math or history or English or whatever. You're not going to find it. The Student Equity Ambassador Club is really just, it's a discriminatory club, and there's 99 of these equity ambassadors. There's 3 per middle school and 3 per high school. So there's a total of 33 high schools and middle schools in the county. So it's 99 of these student equity ambassadors. You can see this is a very well-structured and layered approach. So the county also recently put out an employment requisition for a CEO. Now, we've always known a CEO to be labeled as Chief Executive Officer, not now. It's Chief Equity Officer. And that annual salary is $175,000, okay? So the other thing is, when you look up here, the Equity Collaborative, you're going to say, well, Scott, you have $900,000 there. I thought it was $450,000. That is correct. However, in October, it was announced that another $450,000 was budgeted for this year going into next year for this same organization to provide more equity consulting services. And you got some other fun people in here, like the Loudoun Freedom Center and the NAACP. The Loudoun Freedom Center, so the way I look at this, or the way I try to paint this picture, because you got a lot of things going on. So with the NAACP, the president of the NAACP, Michelle Thomas, she goes in, she puts on her NAACP hat, and she starts equity fires, right? She calls all racism and white supremacy and all this stuff. Then she leaves, and she comes back with her Loudoun Freedom Center hat on. Why? Because it's a business, and she sells consulting services. Why? To put out the equity fires that she started. Now, I posted something on my website where she entered into a $32,000 contract with the county about, I think it was last year, maybe. No, it was the year before. And it was to go through August of 2020. However, COVID kicked in, so there's a contract extension. Now, what this contract was for was to take students from the 5 elementary schools that had the largest attendance of Black students, okay? Where is she taking them? She is taking them to a slave cemetery that she acquired for free back in 2017. It was given to her by the Toll Brothers, a real estate developing organization or business. And what she has done is she's turned it into a money-making operation because she charged $30,000 to the county for these field trips. Now, I know $30,000 isn't a ton of money, but when you consider how she received the land, what she is doing with the land, I just think it's disgusting. You know, it's about power and money and power. Okay, so when we go on to this next slide, what I want to do here is just kind of take a moment to kind of identify some disparities in the arguments that these people are making. They say that the Black students need to do better in school, they need to do better in math, and they need to do better in reading and every other subject, okay? But when you look at this graph on the top here, this is for Black students from 2015 to 2018. Their best subject was social science. Worst subjects were math and reading. However, with this contract that the Loudoun Freedom Center entered into Loudoun County with, one of the line items was for curriculum review. Okay, what was the curriculum review for? It was for social sciences. Why would you want to enter into an agreement to help Black students with their best subject? Not their worst, not at all. Math is not mentioned. Reading is not part of this service agreement. It's social science. And why? Because social science is the gateway for critical race theory. You get in there with your social science, you spread out, you turn everything upside down, and then you can start pulling in the other subjects. As a matter of fact, just today, the county released a statement, or whatever you want to call it, announcing that they are going down the path of revamping their mathematics curriculum. Why? And I put this on my website this afternoon. So it's more equitable. Okay, so that's going to include the removal of algebra in middle school. Now, I strongly recommend people take a look at my site and take a look at this post, because this is an active initiative, right? So you go in with critical race theory under social sciences, and then you pull all this other stuff in until everything is so intertwined, incestuous, and ingrained, your head will be spinning. It's a very deceptive plan. And they're executing it very well, but hopefully we're going to shed some light on that. This chart on the bottom here, we always hear, whether it's in Loudoun County or California or Kansas, the disciplinary for Black students is far worse than everybody else. Okay, prove it. So we're looking at numbers here. On the bottom chart on the left-hand side, what you'll see is a blue bar that represents Black students, and this is school year ending 2017, 2018. 1.99% of the Black students were suspended during that calendar year, or that school year. 0.88% were white, okay? When you look at the numbers, there's about 6,000 Black students in Loudoun County, so that equates to about 120 students were suspended during this school year. As opposed to the white students, there's about 38,000, and about 335 were suspended. Okay, great. Now, you want to claim there's disparities. I'm sure you can play with the numbers and you can come up with whatever story you want. But what were the infractions? What were the incidents? This is just like referencing the number of Blacks that were killed by cops in 2019. That's what they tell you, and that's where it ends. Were these students drunk? Did they come to school with drugs or weapons or fights? We don't know. They won't tell you. They will just tell you that the disciplinary rate is high. Okay, fine. Let's understand, and then we can understand where to focus. But to claim that it's based on the skin color, I think, is a disingenuous attempt to paint an entire school district and other race as culprits is wrong on so many levels. Okay, so this is, I'm trying to, and I think this will be revised, but I'm trying to break critical race theory into basically three compartments, right? On the green side, on the left-hand side, you'll see the, sort of the theory part. So that this is something that the Virginia Project went over the first half of this webinar, and did fantastic job. I mean, there's a lot of science, there's a lot of theory, there's a lot of different approaches from collegiate members and people from the legal community and all this kind of stuff. And some of the more popular names that talk about this are Chris Rufo and James Lindsay. When you go on to the second area, the creation, now there's not a lot of conversation about the creation of critical race theory. So try to think of it in terms of a product, okay? So what we're starting to see pop up in more and more states, more and more communities, is news stories or comments or, Facebook posts or whatever about communities that are instituting new policies within the state. And again, they'll frame it with, very sound, soft sounding terms, equity, diversity, all this kind of stuff. But people are starting to get more and more of a taste of it. Where it starts becoming a little bit more diminished and unknown is when we start looking at the local policy level. We start looking at the school policy level. We start looking at critical race theory consultants, right? And just to frame this is all part of what you call the grievance industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, okay? Now, for the big red ugly part, this is where I've spent a lot of time, because this is an area that I personally believe the parents in the community, not just in Loudoun, because you can take this model and apply it anywhere because it's the same. Maybe different players, maybe different names, but it's the same story. So this is the output, right? So with the output, there's very little awareness, very little. And what goes into it is parents in the community understanding who these equity consultants are. What do they do? Where do they come from? What's their objective? This is where the framework is being built on how to implement critical race theory or equity into a school system. Then you move down to, you start establishing an expansive list of equity partners. That's what I refer to them as. I don't know what else to call them. Like the NAACP, the Southern Poverty Law Center, MSAC, or any other adjacent, civil rights activist group that is involved. Because their word carries a lot in this. Doesn't mean they're right. It just means they are utilizing and weaponizing their skin color. And in some cases, some people have a white collar that they put on that is a religious symbol that abuse it in the name of critical race theory. Do not challenge me because I am a religious figure, but I'm also the president of the NAACP. The creation of the Equity Army begins. Teacher training begins. School board training begins, all on equity. And then eventually the school lessons and everything is then built, created, and it begins to make its way into the classrooms, into the students' materials, whether it's online or in books, in presentations, in testing, in field trips, right? And then at the very bottom is indoctrination. People shy away at that term because it's it's widely used and it's not indoctrination. Yes, it is. It's a quintessential example. It's the definition of indoctrination. But that's what happens. And then on the right-hand side is just another reminder of what happens in the delivery and implementation phase of critical race theory. This for Loudoun County is 349 equity soldiers. Not to say that every county and location in the country will have that, but this is what Loudoun's got, and it's a hell of a lot of people. I've talked about several times about equity partners. I've touched on the NAACP, Loudoun Freedom Center. The Equity Collaborative is one to keep an eye on, right? So this is a group that did the consulting for Loudoun County. One of the founders came from the Pacific Education Group, and there is going to be a story coming out in a book in a couple months. So a couple of years ago, Loudoun County was in the news because a gym teacher, I believe, orchestrated a school lesson called the Runaway Slave Game. Now, it sent everybody, I think it's stupid, but it sent everybody, it created national news and everything, right? I mean, it was just a dumb idea. Black Panthers came out to the school to pay them a visit, and it was just not good. A couple months later, they hired the Equity Collaborative to come in and do the assessment. One of the founders of the Equity Collaborative was involved with the Pacific Education Group in Minnesota, where they charged the school district $30,000 to do a underground railroad simulation with middle school students, whereby they took them out to the woods, put them bags over their heads, wrapped chains around them, and then had the kids come back to the school to write their experiences down on paper and then burn those pieces of paper so there was no evidence. Parents were not aware. And then this is who we hired to conduct our equity consulting. Think about that for just a minute. So when we go down to this block down here, so in Loudoun County, there's roughly 10 equity partners. Their main ones seem to be Teaching Tolerance, which has been rebranded as Learning for Justice. That's owned by Southern Poverty Law Center, financed by George Soros. The Racial Equity Tools right here is an organization that, and it's part of its founding members and contributors were one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, Alicia Garza, and also one of its contributors is Linda Sarsour, radical. I think she claims to be a Muslim, but she starts racial trouble anywhere and everywhere she goes. She's a deplorable, despicable individual. But these are the people that our school district has partnered with. And what makes this even easier to prove is you can go on to Teaching Tolerance or learningforjustice.org. Go into their search, type white privilege, type white supremacy, type critical race theory, and you will be astounded at the lesson plans and the material that are available to you, your students, the teachers, and anybody else in LCPS. It's mind-blowing. And there's 10 of these, right? At least 10 that I've been able to find. And part of my goal, which I haven't achieved just yet, is doing a more comprehensive and thorough write-up about these partners. What can we do? I'm going to give a plug real quick what we can do. We are not going to be stopped. They're coming after my organization, my family, the Virginia Project, parents, teachers, lawmakers in this county, and that's in the news stories. So what are we doing? One of the things we've done is we purchased a new website last night. And so we're going to have two. And we're going to be coming at these people and everybody harder and faster than ever before. So that's what we're doing. One of the things for people scratching their heads, like there's so much going on here. There's some, where do we even begin? And that's a very good question. And it's not fun, but if you're committed, these are some of the steps that I've outlined. Head over to your school sites, your school district's website, plug in the word equity, do a search on equity and see what some of the results are. Begin capturing those results. Save some of those documents, do some screenshots, save some links, because you're going to find that you have a repertoire of links to all kinds of things that you'll want to try to organize in some fashion. And you'll also need them to be able to reference. Also go back and type in Black Lives Matter, white supremacy, whiteness, white privilege. You'll be surprised what you might find. Also, maybe look for Learning for Justice or Southern Poverty Law Center, some of these partners that you might be able to look for. And that will, it's like pulling a thread on the sweater, which you really don't want to do, but in this case, you have to. And then before you realize it, you've got so much information, you don't even know where to begin. So you've got to begin putting them in buckets or classifications, and then you can go back and organize, because there's a lot of overlap in some of these things. Research your school board members, find out who they are. Are they Democrats or are they Republicans? Because frankly, it doesn't matter, because we've had 2 Republican school board members vote for this equity stuff. One of which I'm going to give a reprieve to, because I've since found out more information about this individual and why he voted the way he did. And I'm going to give him a reprieve, and he's going to be off my target list because I understand the circumstances surrounding why he voted the way he did. And that may be a forthcoming story. However, find out their associations, who their friends are, not to target these people, but just to begin painting a picture to connect the dots. Who are they financed by? I know Ian Sorokin on our school board was financed by the Tides Foundation, which is funded by George Soros. Does Ian know that? I have no idea. but I put it out there. Maybe he'll read it. News stories and segments and statements that these school board members make. Now, they're going to be careful with their words, but look for the buzzwords, the equity and the diversity and all this stuff. Research your NAACP, your local NAACP chapter. Understand what they're doing. They're insidious in our county. They're doing it in Fairfax County, and they're engaged heavily in Prince William County. This is Northern Virginia for anybody that's not from the area. But the same would apply to anywhere else in the country. They have a heavy stake in this because it's a race baiting game. This is how they don't care about black students. They care about money and power. Monitor their social media. Look for indicators like equity and social justice. Go on to Learning for Justice Facebook page. You'll be astounded by what they post. Go onto your local NAACP page. You'll be astounded by what they post. Save any and all supporting documents, news stories, social media postings. And then lastly, this is primarily for Mac users. I apologize for PC users. I only use my PC for work, so I don't know a lot about it in the personal life. But I use an app, a very simple app called Snappy. It is very quick to take images or statements or any part of a screen that you need without doing a whole screenshot. It's very quick. It's saved. You can manipulate it. It's very easy. And then I would highly encourage you to use something called OneNote or something of its equivalent to begin organizing your thoughts, your comments, and all the information that you're combining and gathering to try to embark on this battle. On the right-hand side is just a quick pink chart, or I shouldn't say it's pink, but of areas that I'm trying to develop in my head of how to attack this and different elements of support that I'm working on or that I need. It could be legal services. That's a big one right now. Researching these equity partners, researching critical race theory, and finding examples in the classroom. Because there's nothing, here's something that's funny. As we're sitting here through this presentation, I am receiving video after video after video of a live school board presentation for Loudoun County that is going on, that is going to support, like nobody's business, this news story that just came out today. So you never know what kind of nuggets you're going to find. And then this, and I'll post my deck on the slide on my site because I know there's a lot that we went through. These are a lot of buzzwords and terms that you can look for and listen for. As soon as you start hearing them, you're going to see them in your sleep. But also be very aware that these people catch on to what we're catching on to, and they change terminology. Everybody might be aware of something called the 1619 Project. That's still a very active initiative. However, they're gradually using references to the 1619 Project, replacing it with something called hard history. It's the same thing, but they're taking on a newer phrase or term to try to distract from 1619. And we can go over this, or I'll put this on my site. I mean, this is just a listing of some of the primary people and organizations that are involved in this whole initiative. So on that note, I've probably been talking a little bit too long. I don't know. Went through some information kind of fast. And I'm going to turn it back over to the Virginia Project Group for what our next steps might be. I appreciate everybody in their attendance and a willingness to come and listen to what we have to say. It's a very, very powerful thing that's going on, and we need everybody's support and however we can support you. Thank you.
All right, so if you have any questions, please type them into the chat right now, and we'll spend the next couple of minutes working through those. Will there be a link for this presentation? Yes, we're going to plan on putting something up at the Virginia Project and hosting it there. The slides will also be made available.
And once that's available on their website, I'm going to put it on mine. It was taken down the other day, so I think there were some people that were asking about it, and it's because of the problems we started running into. But this will be posted on my site as well, and we'll also link to the Virginia Project. Kelly, that's a great question. In light of things that just happened, I think I can't speak for the Virginia Project, but from my side, trying to develop, I've got a big support effort, but what we're trying to do now is tighten it up. And if you would reach out to me, I will be glad to correspond with you to figure out, how we might be able to work together.
Yeah. So, as far as the story that broke this afternoon is concerned, you can hear, if you're here in the Northern Virginia area, you'll hear more about it on WMAL in the morning and the afternoon. The author, Luke Rosiak, will be speaking. He'll also be talking to Laura Ingraham tomorrow night. So there'll be more on that story coming out as we're taking this serious.
So there's a question here from Emily. Are there PAC chapters starting in other states? I'm in Washington State. So there's not. PAC is just unique to Virginia for right now. However, there is an organization out in Washington State. Oh, off the top of my head, it's Northwest Parents Against Critical Theory, I think is what it's called. They have a Facebook presence, and I know the guy that runs it. I apologize. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but we're in constant communication, and he's well aware of what's going on, and he's trying to do something similar out there.
Yeah, and there's the group FAIR. I'm drawing a blank on what FAIR stands for. Families Against Institutional Racism or something like that, which is pushing back. The best way you can help is, Virginia Type Project takes volunteers. If Scott wants some help Scott. But I'll tell you this much: we have a long road ahead of us. They control all of the institutions. Your kids are being taught this, right now, and we need to be able to be smart and calculated in how we respond, right? Don't respond flippantly to what they're doing. There is some legitimacy to making a better society. I'm all for that, but don't get caught up in trying to go down into the nuance of what they're talking, because you'll lose unless you spend a lot of time really studying this. They play language and word games. I did not go into that tonight. They have whole techniques that they use. The Mott Bailey approach is something that they use. They speak in logical fallacies. They operate in sophistry. So it can be tough, right? Because they control the institution. So I would definitely spend some time, use the resources that Pat and I have provided, and you can you start getting yourself better informed there. Follow the people that we suggest. When you see opportunities, volunteer. You see opportunities to say no, to the stupidity or that you see a family member or somebody that may be like, they just think they're kind of going along with the flow because they don't really know what they're doing. If you see the right opportunity, confront them. But make no doubts, this is some scary, scary stuff, folks. The pathway that they're moving, it is steeped in Marxism, right? It is by design the way that the power structure works, and you can feel it. All of us feel it with cancel culture going on right now. Not sharing names, like it feels like I'm behind the wall right now in East Berlin. That's I'll stop rambling there.
So there's a question here from SM. I don't know if SM is still on the call or not, but it's a very good question. There are many Latino, Black, and Asian Loudoun residents that are against CRT. I am one of them. How can I help? Well, SM, what I would really love for you to do is contact me, because what I can envision is a coalition, and I'm making this up. You call it a BAL, Coalition for PAC. And I think that would be huge, because I agree. I mean, the other part of this, which we didn't touch on, is, you know, why white people tend to be the center target of this. Asians are now referred to as adjunct whites, honorary adjunct whites, and there is a vast, large majority of black people out there that are being lumped in with this movement that they don't want any part of. And it's not fair to them. It's not fair to them for people to look at them and say, oh, you're one of those that thinks I'm a white supremacist. That's not right at all. And, you know, so there's that part is not being talked about a lot. And we need help with that because it's entirely unfair. And while we're on the Latin thing, these people, what they've done is they've taken an entire culture of people, Hispanics, the Latins, and they've mushed them together into something called Latinx. Now, Latinx was created to accommodate LGBTQ that are Hispanic. So instead of, you know, Latin, it is now Latinx. And the reason for that was to accommodate those trans, you know, whatever, the alphabet soup people, which is wrong. You don't completely rename an entire culture of people to suit an agenda just because 1.4% of the people in the country don't know what gender they are. And there needs to be more outcry about that. Where there needs to be more outcry about Asians being referred to as honorary adjunct whites. That is insulting to me, and I'm not even Asian. I just say, you know, we should not allow these radical people to hijack cultures to suit their needs. That's what they are doing with these two groups specifically. Have you ever heard of a black X group or a white X group or Asian X? Neither have I, but I bet someday we will, and I'm sure they're working on it. So, SM, if you're still on the call, I'll pop my site in there again. Email address is at the top. Please send me any information because I would love to work with you. I think that is a fantastic idea.
Yeah, and the Virginia Project actually connected with the New York City's oldest Asian American group about a week ago. There's a fantastic article that they just put out in Newsweek about the impact that this is having on the Asian community. So I would recommend taking a peek at that. But it was a fantastic article, one of the best that I've read, and I've read on this over 5 years, probably hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of articles now. And as far as, you know, the Asian community, like I said, is fighting back. I'm behind the scenes. I speak to Asian Americans in New York and San Francisco, elsewhere in the Pacific Northwest, here locally, or here in Virginia, I should say, in Northern Virginia. Oscar Nomani is doing a lot of work with what's going on with the with Thomas Jefferson High School. So there are some stories and things that you can find there. There's a whole coalition of Asian Americans that are pushing back, and there's a lawsuit now in federal court there. There's also, I think, a loose group that's forming up in Loudoun. I'm drawing a blank on who they are on Twitter right now, but you know, there are options out there, and you know, if you're on Twitter, you can tend to see who, you know, again, if you're following, you know, if you look at my resources page, there's some recommendations for who to follow on Twitter, and that's where I speak to people all around the country now. I have regular calls with people in Illinois and New York, out west, and I've met them all through Twitter, through you know, we're just proactive parents who want to do what's best for our kids. So you'll see there are opportunities there as well, and you know, that's what I got to say about that.
You know, SM, I see a note in here from you that your average Latino hates the Latinx terms. That's right. There's articles that I've read and posted that 98% of the Latin community can't stand that. But you know what? They don't seem to care, because what they're doing, right? This is not a Latin or Asian or Hispanic driven agenda or ideology. What they're doing is they're trying to incorporate and bring in other ethnicities into their group to make it seem as if they're out for all of them. We want to protect everybody. But when you look at the initiatives and the way things are outlined in the schools and what they intend to do, it's almost like, oh yeah, and the Latinx people, oh yeah, and Asians, right? But because they have to try to be inclusive. They're being inclusive to save their own ass, right, and make it look like they're out for all the people, but they're not. They're using people. I like that comment. I think that's great, and you're spot on. Any other questions? Anything at all?
Well, I want to thank you all for participating tonight. Again, if you had follow-up questions, sorry, Esther, are we seeing it infiltrate the faith communities? 100%. Woke Christianity exists. It is a major problem. I know my pastor openly speaks out and tries to speak about this. Critical theory is in no way, shape, or form compatible with Christianity and most other religions. It offers no form of redemption. There's no path to forgiveness. We see that in cancel culture. It's like that in a number of ways. There you go. Paul just posted it. That's what I was just looking for. So if you go to that website, you can see that he is very, I believe his first name is Neil, has written a lot about it. So it is a huge problem. It's tearing. I'm watching it tear apart churches across the country. James Lindsay, who is somebody that we've spoken about that you all should follow, he himself is an atheist, right? But he appreciates religion. He's been one of the most vocal about pointing out how this is impacting Christianity. So yeah, Paul's right. It's religious universities are being taken down. So it's a big impact, and you see it. I've seen it a lot of messages being preached that are steeped in critical theory and not in the Bible. So it's critical theory is it's doing a number on the church as well.
I'd like to say one more thing, and I apologize. I'm not one to normally do something like this. I am going to. I had a GoFundMe posted. They went after it. They went after some donors, so I had to take it down. I don't normally ask for help for anything, but I'm going to be posting a new GoFundMe hopefully tonight, and I'm hoping to spread the word wide and far, because we are officially our battle has officially begun with this woke culture because of the Daily Wire. We all went into this eyes wide open. For me, this was a family decision that we made in the beginning of the school year. We talked about it, me, my wife, and my kids. My kids are older. And we all agreed that it was the right thing to do. And we knew this day was eventually going to come. We were being prepared for it. And I think maybe the Virginia Project would agree with this as well. This just happened to come on with such a fury and so quickly. It was not gradual. It was tremendously fast. I don't want to come across as begging, and I'm not doing that. I will post the GoFundMe on my site, and any help, and we're passing the word. All appreciation. Thanks. I can't even tell you, how much I appreciate you guys joining tonight.
All right. Well, thank you, folks. Moderator, you can shut it down, and we wish you all a happy evening, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Bye.
Bye.